Good morning. Aloha pa. It's wonderful to be with you here today. It's such a privilege and honor to be able to present to you on such an important topic. I was in Finland the last time I was here. It was in, I think it was about 6-7 years ago at the Midsummer's Conference in Rovaniemi. And there was such a beautiful spirit then that I always was looking for an opportunity to come back. And I'm really happy to be back. So thank you for inviting me. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on this topic. Is there hope for the future? I think as all of you know, in the Baha'i faith, we don't have any priests or mullahs or rabbis, so I'm just giving you my personal understanding. You may have a different understanding. And what I like to do is share with you a lot of quotes from the Baha'i writings. Because sometimes I find that when I try to put things in my own words, I distort things. I probably have too many quotes. I apologize to the translator for that. But I'm not going to read all of them, but I'll make the presentation available to the organizers of the conference. And if anyone would like to study the quotations on their own, you're welcome to do so. So basically, there is a series of 3 lectures. So today, we're going to talk about the current state of the world and society. And it may be a little bit depressing at first, but there is hope. There is hope for the future. And then tomorrow I'm going to outline Baha'u'llah's vision of the future, of a glorious future, the New World Order, a golden age that is about to emerge. And then finally on Monday morning, I'm going to explain how this vision is going to unfold. You know, what is the process for the unfoldment of this new civilization, this very hopeful society that we're expecting? And most importantly, what is our responsibility? I think we will see that actually we are all co-builders of this new emerging order, this new civilization that's unfolding. So what is the current state of the world? I think Abdu'l-Baha described it very well. He said, the world is even as a human being who is diseased and impotent, whose eyes can see no longer, whose ears have gone deaf, all of whose powers are corroded and used up. You almost have this image of all of humanity being like a single human being, and it's in the intensive care unit. It's lying on the bed, and it's being attended not by true physicians or skilled physicians, but by a lot of quacks. And the body is getting sicker and sicker, and it seems like every year we're confronted with new crises. And if you look at the world, you can see that there are so many problems. I've just listed a couple of the problems here. We've had a lot of discussion over the last couple of days about climate change and how dangerous that is for the actual our survival. And it's not just climate change. You know, there's also a lot of environmental pollution as well that we've witnessed. There's even a threat of nuclear contamination in Europe itself that's quite frightening. We also see conflicts and wars. You know, it's amazing that in Europe we find that there's actually a major war coming back. And it's over a boundary dispute, you know, which is something that we didn't think that we would see, you know, in this century. We also see a growing disparity between the rich and the poor. You know, although generally the economy of the world has grown, not everyone has benefited from this growth, and the gap between the poor and the wealthy is getting more pervasive, and is also leading to great tension. We also see that corruption is pervasive, and it seems in many ways to be growing. We also see that people are polarized. You know, there seems to be a lot of conflict and contention among many different groups of people. I know that after the 2016 election in the United States, there were more than 30 million people in the United States who stopped speaking to a family member or friend because of the election. So it's incredible that, you know, we take politics so seriously that we would actually stop talking to people. We also see growing financial instability. You know, over the last few decades, we've seen various crises, you know, emerge around the world. We've also seen the threat of global pandemics. You know, all of us experienced what it's like to live with COVID all around us. And that's not the end of it. Many scientists and public health officials are predicting that, pandemics could become a feature of the future. And we saw how when the pandemic emerged, governments did not act quickly enough to address the issue. We also see that although we've made a lot of progress on the issue of racism, that the racism itself seems like it's a pandemic. No matter what we do, the embers of this fire, just keep going on. And we have not been able to eradicate racism. And there are many, many examples of that. And we just had a recent example in France. We also see the rise of religious fanaticism and terrorism, and that's creating a lot of instability in the world. We also see the rise of drug abuse and substance abuse. It's incredible, really, what the opiate crisis is doing, particularly in North America. It used to be that drug abuse was a problem that was confined mainly to developed countries and to urban areas. And now we see that this problem is spreading to rural areas and to the countryside. We also see a significant decline in morality. I know just during the span of my lifetime, it's incredible how much moral standards have been lowered. And we also see, I think particularly in the last decade or so, just an explosion of anxiety, of depression, of mental illness. Mental health has become one of the leading topics of our day and age. And there are many, many more issues. I'm sure that if we consulted about this, we'd be able to identify, many other problems as well. And it looks like things are probably going to get worse. We have a few hints of this as well. The House of Justice, in a recent letter that they sent to the Baha'i community, they said there is a mounting realization on the part of the world's people that the decades ahead are set to bring with them challenges among the most daunting that the human family has ever had to face. So it's been kind of bad, but it looks like, at least in the immediate future, things are going to get worse. Until humanity as a whole undertakes to establish its affairs on foundations of justice and truth, it is, alas, fated to stagger from one crisis to another. I think it's very interesting that Payam said that many cynics think that the Baha'is are naive because we talk about spirituality, but we should be talking about real-world politics. But actually, he made such a good point that really we have no choice but to turn to spirituality. That unless we start to introduce spiritual principles into our society, humanity really has no choice for survival. And it seems that kind of in this day and age, we're navigating very tempestuous seas. The whole world seems a bit uncertain. So my recommendation is that we all brace. And many of these problems are actually identified or associated with materialism. We find that in our writings. And Shoghi Effendi and also Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha have been warning us that these problems really have a deeper cause. And they're symptoms of a deeper problem. And these problems are often associated with materialism. Shoghi Effendi said, "The world is tormented and torn on every side by the forces of destructive materialism. The world, for the most part, is sunk in materialism, and the blessings of the Holy Spirit are ignored. There is so little real spiritual feeling, and the progress of the world is, for the most part, merely material." And this materialism, this orientation seems to be spreading. In fact, The Guardian actually referred to materialism as being cancerous. And we know how devastating cancerous is to the body, but cancerous to the body of humanity is even more devastating. So what do we mean by materialism? I think we're really talking about an orientation. We're not talking about just attachment to some material goods, although that's part of materialism. Part of materialism is this idea that really it's material wealth that brings you joy, but that's not really it. It's more than that. It's an orientation that really ignores the human spirit, that just looks at everything in material terms. Shoghi Effendi said that crass materialism lays excessive and ever-increasing emphasis on material well-being, forgetful of those things of the Spirit on which alone a sure and stable foundation can be laid for human society. And in many ways, since materialism is focused on things that are material and not on the Spirit, it's very self-centered. The pursuit of happiness has given rise to an aggressive and almost boundless sense of personal entitlement. The moral consequences have been corrosive for the individual and society alike, and devastating in terms of disease, drug addiction, and other all too familiar blights of centuries' end. And I think we can see that attitude. There is this sense of entitlement. There's the cult of individualism. We forget the true reality that we're all connected one to the other. And we also forget the true reality that really spirit is what is most important. Spirit, in a way, is more real than things that are material. Anything that you can see with your eye eventually will disappear. It may take a day, it may take a year, it may take a billion years, but everything that is material is eventually bound for disintegration. But everything of the Spirit is everlasting. And also materialism kind of saps us of our energy. It's interesting when you read the writings of the beloved Guardian, he often says that materialism is enervating or enfeebling. And if you think about it, that makes us tired. It takes away our energy. It makes us spiritually sleepy in a way. And materialism is also an orientation which causes us to reject God and to reject his messenger for this day and age. So is it okay to enjoy material things? And, by rejecting materialism, it doesn't mean that we just go to the window and throw out all our possessions. Baha'u'llah makes it very clear that actually it's perfectly fine to enjoy the fruits of material things. And he says that we should actually enjoy them. He said, should a man wish to adorn himself with the ornaments of the earth, to wear its apparels or partake of its benefits it can bestow, no harm can befall him if he alloweth nothing whatever to intervene between him and God. For God hath ordained every good thing, whether created in the heavens or in the earth, for such of his servants as have truly believed in him. Eat ye, O people, of the good things which God hath allowed you, and deprive not yourself from his wondrous bounties. Render thanks and praise unto him, and be of them that are truly thankful. But I think the key principle is moderation. Baha'u'llah talks about moderation in all things. And I think in our society, we see that we're lacking moderation in this respect. I think one way that we can see this is the incredible disparity between the wealthy and the poor. And Abdu'l-Baha actually commented on this when he was traveling in America. He says that hearts must be so cemented together, love must become so dominant that the rich shall most willingly extend assistance to the poor and take steps to establish these economic adjustments permanently. For example, it will be as if the rich inhabitants of a city should say it is neither just nor lawful that we should possess great wealth while there is abject poverty in this community, and then willingly give their wealth to the poor, retaining only as much as will enable them to live comfortably. I mean, this is a picture of Mumbai, and you can see on the one hand, there's one neighborhood which is incredibly prosperous and wealthy, and right next to it is a slum. How can something like that persist in this day and age? And I think what Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha are calling for is kind of a new orientation where we see everyone as part of one family. The world is a neighborhood, and where we all have a responsibility to take care of one another. And in fact, Baha'u'llah says that actually it's important to have maturity, that it's okay to have wealth. In fact, it's, when one achieves maturity, then one will acquire wealth in an honest way and will use the wealth in an honest way for the benefit of humanity. And I think some of the statistics that we're facing are quite stark. In 2017, Oxfam issued a very interesting report, and the report was based on data as of 2015. And what they found is that actually that the richest 1% of the world has as much wealth as the bottom 99%. So you can imagine that in a world such as that, it's going to be unstable. In fact, President Obama, when he addressed the UN General Assembly, he said a world where 1% of humanity controls as much wealth as the bottom 99% will never be stable. And it's even more striking, the disparity. It's, I don't know if you know, but actually 8 men, and it's not men in the anthropological sense, it's men in the gender sense. 8 men control as much wealth as the bottom 50% of humanity. If we look as well, we can see other interesting statistics. They also found that the incomes of the poorest 10% of the world's population only increased by about $3 between the late 1980s and 2011, while the incomes of the richest 1% increased 182 times. So you can see that this disparity has increased over time, particularly in the last few decades. And also it's interesting that Thomas Piketty, he's written a very interesting book on inequality. And he showed that, for example, in the United States, that for the last 30 years, the bottom 50% basically had almost no increase in their real wages when you adjust for inflation. Even though this is a time of great economic prosperity in the United States, but the incomes of the top 1% went up 300%. And I think a lot of this injustice, a lot of this inequality is fueling a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the extreme movements that we're seeing all around the world. So in a way, really, the crises that we are experiencing are symptoms of a greater problem. The root cause is this lack of spiritual values. It's the lack of spirituality. In a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi, he says, the chief reason for the evils now rampant in society is the lack of spirituality. The materialistic civilization of our age has so much absorbed the energy and interest of mankind that people in general do no longer feel the necessity of raising themselves above the forces and conditions of their daily material existence. The universal crisis affecting mankind is, therefore, essentially spiritual in its causes. Man's outlook on life is too crude and materialistic to enable him to elevate himself into the higher realms of the spirit. And I think what also we're seeing is that, and what Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah are trying to explain to us, is that this whole orientation of materialism is not allowing us to see things as they truly are. We always think that anything which is made of matter is real, and anything that is associated with spirit is airy-fairy. But maybe it's actually the opposite. Maybe really, in a way, matter is an expression of spirit. What is it that holds, matter together? What is it that causes the atoms to come together? It's the spirit of attraction. What is it that causes life to continue? Maybe in a way, matter is an expression of unity, of the spirit of unity, of the spirit of attraction. Abdu'l-Baha says that the sea of materialism is at a flood tide, and all the nations of the world are immersed in it. It is my hope that the fish will rise to the surface so that they may behold other wondrous aspects of creation. For the people are like unto the fish swimming in the deep. In the deep sea, it's very, very dark. It's a different universe in the deep sea. Ignorant of the rest of the universe, may they be transformed into birds of the air and soar into the nether atmosphere. May they break all bounds of limitation so that they can observe from the height the lordly procession of infinite creatures. They will see the blue heavens studded with luminous stars, rivers flowing with salubrious water, gardens bedecked with fragrant flowers, trees adorned with blossoms and fruits, birds singing songs of light, humanity ever striving forward, every atom of existence breathing life and force, the universe of God, a wonderful theater upon the stage of which every created thing plays its part. Again, I think what Abdu'l-Baha is trying to do is use these metaphors to try to explain that if we're immersed in a world of materialism, we're not seeing everything. It's like being the fish in the deep sea. We see a little bit, but we don't even see everything in the ocean. We just see what's at the bottom, and at the bottom there's no light in a deep sea. And then as we start to emerge, up through the water, we see more and more. Then when we stick our heads above the water, we begin to see more and more. And then when we make our way onto land, we can see more. And then when we actually get wings and we fly, we can see even more. We can see how vast, this beautiful creation is. In a way, our consciousness is expanded once we begin to see things with a different eye, with the eye of the Spirit. But our world, as Abdu'l-Baha says, is kind of sunk or immersed in materialism. We only see the material. We don't really see the spiritual. And because of that, we don't see each other for who we are. We just see other human beings as material bodies, maybe as competitors, but not as amazing, signs of creation before us. And I think we've really, because of that, we've kind of lost our ability to kind of detect what is good for us, what is healthy. Baha'u'llah uses this interesting metaphor. He says that in this day, the tastes of men have changed, and their power of perception hath altered. The contrary winds of the world and its colors have provoked a cold, and deprived men's nostrils of the sweet savors of revelation. I think again, he's trying to explain to us that there's kind of a whole universe of understanding, a whole universe of consciousness that we've just lost touch with, because we're so immersed in this world, this orientation of materialism. And we find in the Bible Jesus making a very similar point. He says, "For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit." So where does materialism lead us? Where does this very limited orientation leave us? And I've just got a couple of thoughts to share with you here. I think one thing is it leaves us very confused. Baha'u'llah said in the 19th century, and I think it's even more true today, that the world is in great turmoil and the minds of its people are in a state of utter confusion. And I think even in the last decade, we've seen how this confusion has grown. Baha'u'llah says, "We exhort mankind in these days, when no man knoweth how to discern light and darkness, or to distinguish guidance from error." It's very interesting in the Kitab-i-Iran, Baha'u'llah's, one of his most important books, he talks about the issue of oppression. And this is a concept that appears in the sacred scriptures of many religions. And Baha'u'llah says, "What oppression is more grievous than a soul seeking the truth and wishing to attain unto the knowledge of God, should know not where to go for it and from whom to seek it." I think in a way we almost live today in a post-truth world. Truth has become degraded. Now it's about identifying with a particular tribe and sticking with your tribe. And the truth is become less important, and then we just listen to sources of news or to opinions that just already reaffirm our opinions. Social media is actually set up that way, so the algorithms just sort of reinforce our own prejudices, and kind of yearning after the truth in a detached way is something that is not valued as much anymore. And again, Baha'u'llah uses a very powerful metaphor. He uses the metaphor of salty water. It's like we live in a day and age where some people are still looking for truth, or they're still looking for satisfaction, but they go to a salty lake and they drink in the water and it just makes them thirsty. And then out of desperation, they go to another salty lake and they drink in some more water and it leaves them thirsty. And nothing really satisfies that hunger for truth, that hunger for authenticity. Baha'u'llah says, yea, inasmuch as the peoples of the world have failed to seek from the luminous and crystal springs of divine knowledge the inner meaning of God's holy words, they therefore have languished, stricken and sore athirst, in the veil of idle fancy and waywardness. They have strayed far from the fresh and thirst-subduing waters, and gathered around the salt that burneth bitterly. It's interesting that in the book of Amos, in the Old Testament, it's prophesied that in the future, young men and young women will be dying of hunger and thirst. But then it goes on to say that it's not material hunger or material thirst. It's thirst for the Word of God, that in the future the Word of God would not play a role in society and people would suffer greatly. And I think this prophecy is being fulfilled, unfortunately, in this day and age. And in a way, without a divine physician, without a divine educator, we are lost. Going back to this metaphor of humanity as a whole, as a human body that's sick, in the intensive care unit. We haven't listened to the divine physician. We haven't listened to the divine educator for this day and age. And because of that, we continue to suffer. And Baha'u'llah makes this very startling statement. He says, were it not for those effulgent lights that shine above the horizon of his essence. And here Baha'u'llah is talking about all of the divine educators of the past. The people would know not their left from their right. How much less could they scale the heights of the inner realities or probe the depths of their subtleties? I think we need a divine educator. And throughout history, these divine educators, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, Baha'u'llah, Zoroaster, they have all expanded our consciousness over time. And many things that we take for granted actually have their roots in the teachings of these divine educators. And without them, we would be lost. We wouldn't even know our left hand from our right hand. And this seemed to be quite extreme, but if you kind of listen to the discourse in society, which is emerging even in the last couple of years, you can see how utterly confused society is. We don't seem to have any real standards. Baha'u'llah says, we can well perceive how the whole human race is encompassed with incalculable afflictions. We see it languishing on its bed of sickness, sore, tired, and disillusioned. They that are intoxicated by self-conceit have interposed themselves between it and the divine and infallible physician. Witness how they have entangled all men, themselves included, in the mesh of their devices. They can neither discover the cause of the disease, nor have they any knowledge of the remedy. They have conceived the straight to be crooked, and have imagined their friend an enemy. I think this perfectly describes the society we live on. We can just turn on social media and see all the talking heads giving their advice. And, humanity is turning to these sources for its recuperation and resuscitation. And we find that many of these people, not all of them, but many of them are very much driven by their ego, by their vain imaginings, and look where society has been led to. And in a way, we, have a responsibility to share Baha'u'llah's vision, and give people hope and give people understanding. And the House of Justice, in its most recent Raison message, says, there is a longing for a unifying vision. I think there is a hope for this vision that will help to unite people who are contending with one another, and to have a vision that we can all get behind. And they also say how our spirits soar as we see your sincere and devoted striving to proffer the life-giving waters of his revelation to a world that is sore athirst. It's interesting, when the Bab came, it was a time of oppression. And on the anniversary of the 200th anniversary of the birth of the Bab, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, the House of Justice made a really interesting observation. They said that actually the time of the Bab was not that dissimilar to the time of today. It may look very different. People may have worn different outfits back then and had different hairstyles. And certainly Iran of the 19th century is very different than Europe of the 21st century. But in a way, there are some similarities. And one of the similarities is at that time, there was an oppression. But the oppression was not just tyranny, it was looking for truth. People at that time were striving for the truth. They were looking for answers, and they were having a hard time finding it. And I think really that same oppression, in a way, we find in our day and age, that a lot of people are suffering, a lot of people have lost hope, a lot of people are yearning for the truth, and they don't know where to go. They go from one social media channel to another, from one blog to another, from one fad to another, but it's not satisfying them. It's just making them thirstier and thirstier. So I think in many ways, in our day and age, we find some of the same challenges. I think a second really outcome of materialism is that it's alienated us from our true selves. We have forgotten our true identity. Baha'u'llah said something very profound. He said, true loss is for him whose days have been spent in utter ignorance of his self. I mean, can you imagine living your entire life and not knowing who you are? And I think that really applies for most of humanity. Most of humanity, when they reflect on who they are, when they try to find themselves, they're looking at the non-essential aspects. They're focused very much on their gender, on their race, on their bodies, on their opinions. And a lot of the opinions are just received from other people, or opinions that they have gotten from the latest movie or the latest pop song. But really, our true identity is our soul, is our spirit. That is what makes us authentic. That is what makes us unique. Our soul is the most important, the most authentic dimension of who we are. Abdu'l-Baha, when he was in Paris, said, man, the true man, is soul, not body. Abdu'l-Baha goes on to say in one of the talks that he gave in America, that in the world of existence, there is nothing so important as spirit, nothing so essential as the spirit of man. And here when he says man, he means man in the anthropological sense. The spirit of man is the most noble of phenomena. The spirit of man is the meeting between man and God. The spirit of man is the animus of human life and the collective center of all human virtues. The spirit of man is the cause of the illumination of this world. Man himself may be likened to the lamp. His spirit is the light within that lamp. And Jesus said something very similar. He said, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. This is our essential defining characteristic. This is what makes us unique. Everyone wants to be unique. Everyone wants to be special in a way, but we wear the same clothing. We listen to the same music. We often pass around the same opinions. But really what makes us truly unique is our souls. And one thing about the human soul is that it has the capacity to reflect all of the attributes of God. Everything in creation has the ability to reflect some aspect of God, some quality of God. You could say like the lion, demonstrates courage. The dog, I think it just manifests many qualities, including loyalty. I think the mosquito shows patience. But we human beings, we have the capacity to do it, to reflect all of these attributes. If we polish the mirror of our hearts, and if we point the mirror of our hearts in the right direction, we can start to manifest some of this light. And the more we get rid of envy and greed, we wipe off this dust from our heart, the more we can, become who we were meant to be, the more we can manifest these qualities. In fact, Abdu'l-Baha says that we should become incarnate light and personified spirit. So that is our destiny. But actually, one of the qualities of God is uniqueness. And if you look at creation, you'll see that everything is unique. There are no two leaves that are the same. There are no two snowflakes that are the same. Even there are no two pebbles that are exactly the same. And even the fingerprints of identical twins are not identical. They're different. And we are also different. Each one of us has the ability to manifest all of these attributes of the divine, but we do so in a different way, in a different combination. In all of us, certain qualities are predominant. It's like holding a beautiful diamond to the light. The light is going to be refracted differently in every diamond because every diamond or every crystal is different. So the way to be intensely unique, the way to be intensely authentic, the way to be intensely true to yourself is to polish the mirror of your hearts and point the mirror of your hearts in the right direction so that you can manifest these attributes. And in a way, really, when you do that, you're reconnecting with your essential self, because your essential self is the divine spark within. Well, another legacy of materialism is that, unfortunately, it's filled us with despair and unhappiness. And I think Payam also reflected on this as well. It's a bit odd that really in this day and age, particularly in a place like Finland, in Europe, life has gotten better in some ways. Food and shelter and comfort is not such as much a struggle as it was for our ancestors 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We have a lot more options in life. We have more opportunities to connect with other people. Life expectancy has significantly increased. In almost a century, the life expectancy has almost doubled. Many children a century ago would die in infancy. That was very, very common. And physical survival is less of a challenge. But it's strange that despite, this material improvement in our lives, in some respects, we're witnessing a significant rise in depression, in suicide, in self-harm, in loneliness, and unhappiness. It shows you that really material comfort is helpful to a point, but it doesn't really satisfy us. It doesn't quench that thirst for meaning, for happiness. Abdu'l-Baha says that the heart is never at rest and never finds real joy and happiness until it attaches itself to the eternal. Man must attach himself to an infinite reality so that his glory, his joy, and his progress may be infinite. Only the spirit is real. Everything else is as a shadow. Man is in reality a spiritual being, and only when he lives in the spirit is he truly happy. I think that makes sense, really, if we're designed primarily as spiritual beings that happen to be associated with the body. How can we possibly ever feel fulfilled? How can we ever possibly feel truly happy unless we connect with our authentic self? How can we be happy unless we connect with our soul? And, Abdu'l-Baha, emphasized this theme many, many times. In one passage, when he was giving a talk, he says that basically we enter naked into this world and we leave naked. All of our possessions, all of our titles, when we leave this world, they're gone. The only thing that we leave behind is our service, what we did for other people. And I found this quite powerful. These are words attributed to Abdu'l-Baha, so in a way they're kind of like a pilgrim note, but I think they ring very much true. When Abdu'l-Baha was in Paris, he was reported to have said this: "Do not believe for one moment that it is possible for man to obtain happiness, joy, serenity, and confidence save through God. If his heart is not attached to God, no matter how seemingly permanent is the structure of his material happiness, it will totter down. The utmost is this: he will live a few days, he will drink a few cups, he will smoke a few cigarettes, he will dance a few steps, he will call on a few friends, and then what then? The curtain will fall down, the voices are hushed, and darkness prevails, and eternal silence and oblivion spread their ominous wings." I think if you look at our society, we're so much attached to many trivial pursuits, and we're out there for, instant gratification, but it doesn't really give us true meaning. It doesn't give us real value. The purpose of life is to develop our souls. This is only our temporary home. This is not our permanent home. We believe that, after this world, we are reborn into a world of spirit, and that our souls will continue to progress. So that's why it's so important in this world to develop these attributes of kindness, of love, of justice, of generosity, These are the important lessons of life. And this world is really a school for the soul. It's designed for us to develop our spiritual capacities. And we can't do this alone. We do this by serving other people, by helping other people. I think another lesson or legacy of materialism is that it's left us isolated, disconnected, and very self-centered. You know that in prison, if they want to punish a prisoner, they actually put them in solitary confinement. The worst type of punishment is to be by yourself, completely alone and disconnected from other human beings. The isolation and despair from which so many suffer are products of an environment ruled by an all-pervasive materialism. And in this, the Friends must understand the ramifications of Baha'u'llah's statement that the present-day order must be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. I think this is a very powerful passage from a letter written by the House of Justice in 2010. And the Baha'i international community also said in a very interesting statement on the future, they said, no aspect of contemporary civilization is more directly challenged by Baha'u'llah's conception of the future than is the prevailing cult of individualism, which has spread to most parts of the world. Nurtured by such cultural forces as political ideology, academic elitism, and we heard from Payam yesterday a lot about academic elitism, and a consumer economy, the pursuit of happiness has given rise to an aggressive and almost boundless sense of personal entitlement. The moral consequences have been corrosive for the individual and society alike, and devastating in terms of disease, drug addiction, and other all too familiar blights of centuries' end. I think this very much describes the world in which we live in. It's kind of strange. We live in a very big city like London, 7-8 million people, and yet, the amount of loneliness and disconnectedness that you see in London is incredible, but you think that's counterintuitive. In a city where so many people are packed together, there should be more human connection than we witness. And the House of Justice also warned that, many harmful attitudes are out there, and that actually we ourselves have to be careful, that we often imbibe, many of these harmful attitudes and choices. Our society very much admires and worships power. We adore status. We have a love of luxury. We often are very attached to trivial pursuits. Our culture also glorifies violence and is obsessed with self-gratification. And if you look around the world, you'll see, that there are many, many signs of moral decline. The Guardian, writing many decades, identified some of these, but actually, I think that the more we look around us, the more we see that these are increasing. We see an increase in crime. We see political corruption in ever widening and higher circles. We see the loosening of the sacred ties of marriage. We see the inordinate craving for pleasure and diversion. Society has moved very far from the Guardian's injunction to live a chaste and holy life, with its implications of modesty, purity, temperance, decency, and clean-mindedness. In a way, we're kind of like this frog. I think all of you have heard the story that if you put a frog into boiling water, it'll immediately jump out. But if you put the frog into room temperature water and then you slowly turn up the heat, it won't realize that its condition is worsening and until it's too late, and then it won't be able to jump out. And I think in a way we live in a society like that. The society is gradually, year by year, declining. The moral standards are going down, and we're not noticing it so much because it's happening gradually. But actually it's putting all of us in peril, both on an individual level, but also on a collective level. And I remember I heard a talk by Hooper Dunbar, and it really struck me. He says that, many of us, we look at the Baha'i standards, which seem and are very high, and then we look at the standards of the world, which are very low, and we say, okay, I'm going to put myself somewhere in between. And that's the proper way to live. But actually, if you do that, you're really on a downward course, because the standards of society are plummeting. And if you put yourself somewhere in between the standards that Baha'u'llah has called us to follow and the standards of society, in a way, you're on a downward trend. We should always aim higher. We may not achieve it. In fact, none of us will fully achieve the Baha'i standard. It's impossible. But we should be aiming for that standard, not aiming for a standard that's somewhere in between the two. I think a fifth legacy of this whole orientation of materialism is that it's left us with institutions which are just completely incapable of addressing the challenges of the modern age. They are not fit for purpose. They fail to reflect the sacredness and nobility of every human being. We live in a world where rights are very much based on nationality, not on the fact that we're human beings. All of us have this divine spark within us. All of us are sacred. All of us are entitled to equal rights. And yet we find that the institutions that we have designed, many of them go back centuries, and they're not really fit for the modern age. The House of Justice, in the recent Rezwan message, said that there is widespread acknowledgement that the present-day structures of society are ill-prepared to address the needs of humanity in its current travails. Shoghi Effendi also remarked that the leaders of religion, exponents of political theories, governors of human institutions, are witnessing with perplexity and dismay the bankruptcy of their ideas and the disintegration of their handiwork. And I think the House of Justice summed it very well. They said the world is polarized and paralyzed. I think particularly paralyzed is what we see. The institutions that we developed, seem incapable of dealing with the problems of today. Baha'u'llah says that the winds of despair are, alas, blowing from every direction, and the strife that divides and afflicts the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appears to be lamentably defective. And again, we see all of these crises occurring, and they seem to be coming with greater frequency. And we try to treat the crises, but we need to really treat the underlying cause. They're all symptoms of this more fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is really a spiritual problem. Are not these intermittent crises that convulse present-day society due primarily to the lamentable inability of the world's recognized leaders to read aright the signs of the times, to rid themselves once and for all of their preconceived ideas and fettering creeds, and to reshape the machinery of their respective governments according to those standards that are implicit in Baha'u'llah's supreme declaration of the oneness of mankind, the chief and distinguishing feature of the faith he proclaimed. Baha'u'llah said, the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. And I think we as Baha'is, we have to be careful. We are not immune from the cancer of materialism. We also are at risk. We live in a society where materialism is pervasive and we are affected by it. We cannot help but be affected. It would be perhaps impossible to find a nation or people not in a state of crisis today. The materialism, the lack of true religion, and the consequent baser forces in human nature, which are being released, have brought the whole world to the brink of probably the greatest crisis it has ever faced or will have to face. The Baha'is are part of the world. They too feel the great pressures which are brought to bear upon all people today, whoever and wherever they may be. Now, this letter was written by the Shoghi Effendi in 1956, but I think it's even more true today than it was when it was first written. Also, Shoghi Effendi warns us. He says, we seem to forget the clear and repeated warnings of our beloved Master, who in particular during the concluding years of his mission on earth laid stress on the severe mental tests that would inevitably sweep over his loved ones of the West. Tests that would purge, purify, and prepare them for their noble mission in life. We know that our fellow believers in the East had to face many physical tests. Many of them were imprisoned, many of them were tortured, and many of them even executed. In the West, we haven't had to face so much the physical tests. our tests are mental. So you may, breathe a sigh of relief in a way. Mental tests seem easier, but in a way they're harder. When you're facing a physical test, you know what's happening. There can be no doubt. But when you're experiencing a mental test, it's much more subtle. You may not know that you're being tested. So we constantly need to be on guard. So after all of this news, why should we be hopeful for the future? And I think there are basically two reasons. One is the influence of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah has come with a message of hope. Baha'u'llah has come to revitalize humanity. Baha'u'llah has come with a set of teachings that will completely reorient, our institutions. And I think closely associated with that and really connected with that is the maturing of humanity, that humanity is actually maturing. Human nature is not static. But we have to admit that people are losing hope. Baha'u'llah says that the world's sickness is approaching the stage of utter hopelessness. He also says, the House of Justice says that it is no wonder that in some quarters, it is no wonder that in some other quarters, hope has become a depleted resource. There is tremendous darkness in the world today, the darkness caused by mankind's going against the laws of God and giving way to the animal side of human nature. People must recognize this fact and consciously struggle against pessimism and depression. My wife and I, subscribe to this service that actually every day they provide us with a new Baha'i quote. And it's very inspiring. And one day we received this quote, which really shook us. And Abdu'l-Baha talks about how, the situation of humanity is getting worse and worse, that the body of humanity may not be able to sustain things anymore. It's just getting so difficult. Chaos and confusion are daily increasing in the world. They will attain such intensity as to render the frame of mankind unable to bear them. It seems like these tests are becoming so great that actually it's hard to hold things together anymore, both individually but also collectively as humanity. Then will men become awakened and become aware that religion is the impregnable stronghold and the manifest light of the world, and its laws, exhortations, and teachings the source of life on earth. I think in some of the succeeding lectures I'll explain the important role of religion in rebuilding society, the important role of religion in building a modern world. But religion is redefined. Religion is not the worship of tradition. Religion is a dynamic spirit. Again, this metaphor that Baha'u'llah uses is very powerful. We have the sick patient on the bed, and many people are going to the patient, prescribing different cures, but actually all of these different remedies, by and large, are making the patient sicker and sicker and sicker. And the divine physician who has the remedy for the body of humanity is prevented from administering it. I think we have to appreciate that with the coming of Baha'u'llah, a new force has been released into the world. The whole structure of society is being shaken. Baha'u'llah says the world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system. Through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. And there was a lot of discussion in Payam's presentations and also in our discussions with the youth and our panel discussion about how there are two forces at work in the world today. There are the forces of integration and cooperation, and there are the forces of disintegration. And both of these forces are changing humanity, and they seem to be working in parallel. On one hand, you have the forces of light, and on the other hand, the forces of darkness. There's quite a long quote here, but maybe you can study this on your own, but I'll just take some extracts. Shoghi Effendi says that the constructive process stands associated with the nascent faith of Baha'u'llah and is the harbinger of the new world order that faith must ere long establish. the destructive forces that characterize the other should be identified with a civilization that has refused to answer to the expectation of a new age and is consequently falling into chaos and decline. A titanic, a spiritual struggle, unparalleled in its magnitude, yet unspeakably glorious in its in its ultimate consequences, is being waged as a result of these opposing tendencies in this age of transition through which the organized community of the followers of Baha'u'llah and mankind as a whole are passing. So that's why in the world today you see very positive developments and very negative developments. And in a way, these two are being synchronized. They're working together, Such simultaneous processes of rise and of fall, of integration and disintegration, of order and chaos, with their continuous and reciprocal reactions on each other, are but aspects of a greater plan, one indivisible, whose source is God, whose author is Baha'u'llah, the theater of whose operation is the entire planet, and whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind. And the irony is that it seems that both of these forces, are leading humanity to its destiny. The Universal House of Justice said in a recent message, in a message in 2013, one is destructive in nature, while the other is integrative. Both serve to carry humanity, each in its own way, along the path leading towards its full maturity. Though devastating in their effects, the forces of disintegration tend to sweep away barriers that block humanity's progress, opening spaces for the process of integration to draw diverse groups together and disclosing new opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. So even the dark forces at work in society are creating an opportunity for greater integration, for greater cooperation among humanity. And really to have faith in the future, to have faith in humanity is not to be ignorant. It's not to deny history. I think if you look at the 20th century, you'll see so many horrors. We saw the horrors of World War I, of World War II. We saw the horrors of genocide, of the Holocaust. We saw many wars, in addition to World War I and II. Payam also has shared with us, the horrors of genocide in Rwanda, amongst the Rohingya people in Myanmar, and in many other places in the world. And you look at this and you lose faith in humanity. There's so many examples of man's inhumanity to man. But in a way, to have faith in humanity is not to deny history, but to understand it. And in a way, all of humanity, like one human being, has been going through a developmental process. We started off as infants, and then humanity has moved to its stage of childhood, and now we are at our stage of adolescence. And so really the state of the world reflects a distortion of the human spirit, not its essential nature. When we look at the world, we're not seeing the true emergence of human spirit. And if you think about adolescence, adolescence is a very turbulent time. And many teenagers, they have a lot of energy, they have a lot of power, but they're often very headstrong. And they don't know how to channel that energy in a constructive way. But also many teenagers are very idealistic as well. And I think in a way that describes the day and age in which we live in. We're kind of at the threshold of adulthood, but we're trying to prolong our adolescence. But it's time to really end our adolescence. We need to move into a new stage, a stage of our maturity. Human nature is not static. It's dynamic. We are not static. It'd be very unfair if each of us were judged on how we behaved when we were toddlers. It'd be very unfair if each of us was judged on how we behaved as teenagers. That's not fair. And in a way, really, there's a new world that's sort of emerging from these crises. In a way, the recurring crises that we are experiencing, they're like the convulsions that a mother experiences when she's giving labor, when she's giving birth to something new. As the convulsions become more frequent and rapid, they announce the birth of something new and wonderful. And I think in the same way, the crisis that we are experiencing are the death pangs of an old civilization and the birth pangs of a new, diverse, and world-embracing civilization. Shoghi Effendi says, we stand on the threshold of an age whose convulsions proclaim alike the death pangs of the old order and the birth pangs of the new. Through the revelation of Baha'u'llah though the revelation of Baha'u'llah has been delivered, the world order which such a revelation much needs beget is as yet unborn. So these crises coming with greater frequency, are foretelling the coming of something new. And I think this new thing that is stirring in all of humanity is also stirring within each human being. Baha'u'llah says, a new life is, in this age, stirring within all the peoples of the earth, and yet none hath discovered its cause or perceived its motive. The teachings that Baha'u'llah has shared with us, the new understanding that he's given us, has allowed us to become more conscious, more fully aware of who we are, more fully human. And I'll just conclude this session today by just looking into the future. The immediate future looks very dark, but the distant future is incredibly bright. It's so bright that we cannot even imagine it. Shoghi Effendi says that God's purpose is none other than to usher in ways he alone can bring about, and the full significance of which he alone can fathom, the golden age of a long divided, a long afflicted humanity. Its present state, indeed, even its immediate future, is dark, distressingly dark. Its distant future, however, is radiant, gloriously radiant, so radiant that no eye can visualize it. So thank you very much for your patience. I don't know if we have time for questions or comments.